We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Beis in Mesechet Kesubos. This is Kesubos Daf 73b. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. Let's say you have a situation where there's a kiddushin, and the kiddushin is al atnai, but then the marriage, the actual act of bia, so it's just done stam, nothing is mentioned. So Rav over there says that the kiddushin is going to be effective, and the way Abaya understands Rav, it's because at the time of the actual marriage, at the act of bia, so we say ein adam osa be'ilaso be'ilas nos, a person is not going to have this act of relations bia be'ilas nos, and therefore that was done for kiddushin purposes, and the kiddushin is effective. And Shmuel says no, since there was a condition, and the condition was not met, so the kiddushin is not going to be effective. So the Gemara had asked a question from the Mishnah because the Mishnah said, let's say you have a situation again where she doesn't fulfill the Tanai because she has oaths upon her. So it says that when he divorces her, so he doesn't have to give her the ksuba. So it sounds like he does have to divorce her. It sounds like the marriage is actually effective. And the Gemara assumed that the case is exactly the case of Rav and Shmuel. The case is where the kiddushin was ala Tanai, and then kinsa stam, he married her stam. And so again, it seems to be that the kiddushin is effective and a get is required. It seems to support Rav, and it seems to be a refutation of Shmuel. And so the Gemara says, lo, no, that's not what the Mishnah is talking about. The Mishnah simply means kidsha stam v'kinsa stam. The case is that the kiddushin was done stam, the marriage was done stam, there was no tanai. And so the Gemara says, if that's the case, avol kidshal tanai v'kinsa stam, if that's how you understand the Mishnah, so that would imply like Shmuel, that let's say the kiddushin was done ala tanai, and then the marriage was done stam. So hachanami delo boigit, it sounds like in such a situation, indeed, the person would not require a get, because we would say that the kiddushin is not effective. But if that is the case, so adatani hamekadesh es isha almanas she'ino le nedarim. So instead of saying in the Mishnah that if a person is mekadesh a woman on the condition that there are no nedarim, v'nimtzu ale nedarim, and then it turns out there are nedarim upon her, eino mikudesh. So it said again the kiddushin is not good. So it should have said an even bigger chiddush like Shmuel. Lisni kinsa stam. It should have said then he goes ahead and marries her stam. V'nimtzu ale nedarim, and it turns out there are nedarim upon her, eino mikudesh. So that's not a kiddushin. V'kol shekeinha, and certainly in a situation just where you just have a case of kiddushin, of course it's not going to be a good kiddushin. You should have said the bigger chiddush. And to that the Gemara says, hachanami kamar, no, this is exactly what the Mishnah is saying. The Mishnah is saying exactly that case. Hamekadesh is isha almanas she'eno le nedarim. Here's how you understand the Mishnah. A person is mekadesh a woman on the condition that she doesn't have any nedarim upon her, v'kinsa stam, but then he marries her stam, he doesn't put any condition there. V'nimtzu ale nedarim, it turns out there are nedarim upon her, eino mikudeshes. So in such a situation, the kiddushin is not good, exactly like Shmuel says. But the Mishnah says, kidsha stam v'kinsa stam, if the kiddushin was stam, and the marriage was stam, so in that case, teitze shelo b'ksuba, then she's divorced without a ksuba, ksuba hu delo boy, she doesn't require the ksuba, hagita boy, but in that case, since there was no condition made at all, so then a get would be required. But the Gemara says, umayishna ksuba delo boy, but if that's the case, what's the difference that a ksuba is not required? The Amr, because he says, yefshi b'isha nadronis, I don't want to marry a woman who has these oaths, who has these nadarim upon her. So yachi, if so, get nami loti boy. If that's the case, if there's an assumption over here that the person, the husband, did not want to marry her, if she's an isha nadronis, if she's a woman who has these nadarim upon her, so then a get shouldn't be required at all. We should assume that the kiddushin is not good, even in a situation where it is done stam. And to that, the Gemara answers, Amar Rabba says, Tzricha get mi divreim. No, in that situation where the kiddushin is stam and the nisuin is stam, so in that case she doesn't require a get on a doraisa level, because again, there is an assumption that the person did not want to marry an isha nadronis. This get is only required on a derabanan level. V'chein Amar Rav Chisda, and similarly, that's what Rav Chisda says, Tzricha get mi divreim. The get is required on a derabanan level. And the Gemara continues, Rava Amar Rava says, Tana sfuke misafkale. The Tana over here, really, he is in doubt about the halacha. So Gabe Mamona, so when it comes to the ksuba, which is a money issue, so Lakula, so we're lenient, we say he doesn't have to pay the ksuba, because again, it could very well be the person doesn't want to marry an Isha Najranis. But Gabe Isura, but when it comes to the Isser situation in this case, are we going to require a get? So then L'chumra, then we go L'chumra, and we say maybe the marriage was good, and therefore maybe a get is required. And the Gemara now continues with another interpretation of the Machlokas Rav and Shmuel. Amar Rabba says, Machlokas betos shtei noshim. The Machlokas between Rav and Shmuel is when this mistake was made involving two women. Aval betos isha achas, but if you're just talking a mistake involving one woman, one wife, divrei hakol, then everybody would agree, ein sricha himenu get. She doesn't require a get in such a situation if she has nedarim upon her and there was a tanai, there was a condition, so we assume that the marriage is not good. Rashi over here explains, Machlokas de Rav u'Shmuel, the Machlokas of Rav and Shmuel, B'to shtei noshim, is when there was a mistake by two women, meaning to say as follows. Kiddush Leah al Tanai. Let's say the person, he had a Kiddushin with Leah, and there was a condition that he made. Visha acheres, kana stam achere. Then there was another woman that he married, and he married her stam, he didn't make any Tanaim, and he married her right after. V'nimtzu ala nedarim. It turned out that the second wife, she had nedarim upon her. V'hainu ta'usa, that was the mistake. So Rav Savar, so Rav holds, Kevan de lo asni bahada, since there was no Tanai made with this second wife at all, dahach, so afa pisha kvar gila daito, she been adronis. Now, even though he showed by the first wife that he doesn't really want to marry a woman who's an adronis, tzricha himenu get, still a get is required. Dilma legaba dahach chaviva levelo kapit, because maybe the second wife that he married, he liked her so much that he wasn't really so strict about the fact that she had nedarim. He didn't make a Tanai, and therefore the marriage is good, a get is required. Ushmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, no, Kavan de Gali Daite Gali. Once the person is showed with wife number one that he cares, so then we assume by wife number two as well, and the Kiddushin is not good. And according to Rabba, but if you're talking about just one wife, Kid Shal Tanai V'kin Stam, the case we had before where the Kiddushin, where he said the Tanai with this woman and just the marriage was Stam, so there everybody agrees that the Tanai is effective and the marriage is not. Afilu Rav Moda de Daite Atanoi. Even Rav agrees that the person is going to be strict about the Tanai, and therefore the Kiddushin is not going to be good. That is how Rabbah understands the machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Abaye, so Abaye says, he responds to Rav and he says as follows, 1 second. But our Mishnah, that's talking about one wife, it's not talking about two wives. And yet we asked, the Gemara asked a question on Shmuel from the Mishnah, and that implies not like Rabbah says, that implies that the machlokas Rav and Shmuel was by one woman. And so the Gemara instead says, rather, if you're going to say a statement like Rabbah along those lines, it should be as follows. Amar Rabbah says, Machlokas betos isha achas ke'ein shtei nashim. The Machlokas Rav and Shmuel, it is by one wife, but it's a case that is similar to a situation with two wives. Aval betos isha achas gradita, but if you have a situation of a mistake made by one wife, so divrei akol ein tzricha himenu get. So again, everybody agrees there is no get that is going to be required. The marriage is not going to be good. And Rashi over here explains, Machlokas betos isha achas ke'ein shtei nashim. The Machlokas Rav and Shmuel is by a mistake by one wife that is similar to a case of two wives, meaning as follows. Kid Shal Tanai, the case is again, the Kiddushin was done on condition. V'girsha minho erisin, and then there was a divorce during the stage of erisin. V'chazar v'kin stam, then he goes out and he marries her stam. So over there where there was a divorce in the interim, Ba'hi Amar Rav, in that case Rav says, Tzricha get, there Rav says that she requires a get, Techi Isha Acheres Dami, because since there was a divorce in the interim, it's like a whole new marriage over here, and therefore we say the Tanai is not going to be effective, and the marriage will, L'Shem Kiddushin Baal, and therefore the act of Bia was done, L'Shem Kiddushin, V'legol L'Meimar Tanoi Kamo Samach, you don't say that he's relying on the first Tanai, there was already a divorce from that first Tanai. Well, Shmuel Savar, and Shmuel says, no, Hagali Lo Daite Meikar, he Nadronis. No, he showed in the first marriage he doesn't want to marry Nadronis. And therefore when he goes and has the Kiddushin again, he is thinking about that Tanai. But if it's really just a mistake by one woman, meaning to say it's all through the regular first Kiddushin, so over there, if it was all through the original Kiddushin, which was a Tanai, therefore the Tanai is effective and the marriage is not, everyone agrees. And Rashi continues, and now, according to this approach, when we asked the question earlier from the Mishnah, and here was the question: My love, Kidshal Tanai Vikinsa Stam. Isn't it talking about the Mishnah talking where there was a Kiddushin al Tanai and then he marries her Stam Misha Girsha after he already divorced her, meaning exactly our case. Develo Girsha, because if there was no divorce in the interim, Lekalaman Damar, there's nobody that says that the Kiddushin would be good, because in such a situation, certainly the Tanai will be effective. But yet, what does it say in our Mishnah? Where there is a Gerishin in the interim, it says, Ksuba lo boy, Ksuba is not needed, Hagita boy, but a get is required, and that was the question from our Mishnah on Shmuel. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei Abaye, so Abaye asks on Rabbah's approach to the Machlokas Rav and Shmuel. It says, Kidsha Betos, it says, let's say a person has a Kiddushin with a woman that's a mistake, Upachos Mishava Pruta, or let's say he marries her but he gives her less than a Shava Pruta, which is not really a good Kiddushin. V'chein Katan Shekidish, and also let's say you have a minor who does Kiddushin, that's also not a good Kiddushin. Afal Pisha Shalach Sivlonos La'achar Mikan, now even though he's going to send some gifts afterwards, Eino Mikudeshes, we say that the Kiddushin is not good, those later gifts are not not going to affect the Kiddushin. Shemachmas Kiddushin Rishonim Shalach, because he's sending them all based on the fact that he understood the first Kiddushin was good, and of course it is not. But the Tana Kama says, V'im Ba'alu Kanu, but if they have an act of relations, so then it will be an acquisition, it will be a Kiddushin. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, Mishum Rabbi Yishmael, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, in Ba'alu Lo Kanu, if there's an act of relations, it is still not going to be a kinyan. So you see over here, according to the Tana Kama, the kinyan is going to be effective if there is an act of relations. And so the Gemara says, V'hacha de toos isha achasi. Over here you have a situation where it's just one wife. It's not a situation of two wives. And therefore the Kiddushin really should not be effective over here, according to everyone. Upligin, yet we see over here a machlokas tanoim, and we see according to Tanakama, that if there's an act of relations, it is an acquisition. It is going to be good. And so therefore it seems to be this goes against what Rabbah said. And the Gemara says, my love, is it not talking exactly our case? Toos nadarim, the cases where there was a mistake in terms of nadarim. It turns out he did a Kiddushin with her. She had nadarim upon her. Then there was an act of relations, and you have a machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Yishmael. And again, according to Rabbah, everybody should agree in such a situation that the Kiddushin should not be good. And so the Gemara says, lo, no, this case has nothing to do with our case of Nadarim. Rather, the case is, Tos pachos mishava pruta. The case is, the guy made a mistake. He gave her less than a shava pruta. Well, of course it wasn't a good Kiddushin. That was the case. And the Gemara says, 1 second, pachos mishava pruta behedya katanila. That's already a case over there. It said, kidsha betos, and then it said, pachos mishava pruta. Those were two separate cases. It says, kidsha betos, upachos mishava pruta. So you see, the tos is not the same as the shava pruta. You can't say it's all talking about less than a shava pruta, and it has nothing to do with the case of a situation of a Kiddushin where he thinks she has no nadarim upon her. And so to that, the Gemara answers, no, prushe kamefarish. Really over here, it is simply explaining itself when it says pachos mishava pruta. It means as follows. Kidsha betos, let's say he marries her in a mistaken fashion. Ketzad, how so? What is the mistake? As follows. Kagon shekidsha bepachos mishava pruta. He marries her by giving her less than a shava pruta. And therefore, again, there's a machlokas tanoim if the act of relations later is going to be considered to be a good marriage. And to that, the Gemara says, if that's the case, so what is the machlokas tanoim over here? But what exactly are they arguing about? Mar savar adam yodea she'in kiddushin tovsin b'pachos mishava pruta. One holds that everybody knows. People know that kiddushin is not going to be effective less than a shava pruta. V'gamar u'bal l'shem kiddushin. Therefore, it is clear that the act of relations is l'shem kiddushin. That's why the Tanakama says that it is a good kiddushin. Umar savar ein adam yodea she'in kiddushin tovsin b'pachos mishava pruta. The other one, Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, he says people do not know that kiddushin is not effective less than a shava pruta. And therefore the act of B is really being done according to the knowledge of the first Kiddushin, and of course the first Kiddushin is not effective, and the point is therefore that this case is not relevant at all to our situation of Neder, because here we're talking about a case specifically of less than a Shava Pruta. And the Gemara continues, Eisve, we have a question from another Brisa. Let's say a person says, I'm having relations with you on the condition that my father, that he agrees to this marriage. So the Tanakama, the Brisa says, even though the father really does not want it to be a Kiddushin, it is still going to be a Kiddushin. We ignore the Tanai. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says, Mishum Rabbi Shimon, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, we don't ignore the Tanai. If the father is willing, if he accepts the marriage, it's a good Kiddushin. Lo ratza ve'ena mekudeshes. If the father does not accept the marriage, it is not going to be a good Kiddushin. And so here also, Abai asks, but over here, it's all talking about one wife, and it's a very similar case. In this situation, there was a condition over here, and then he had relations with her. Upligin, it seems to be a machlokas tanoim. We don't simply say that since there was a tanai that was not fulfilled, therefore the Kiddushin is not good. No, on the contrary, the Tanakama says that when he has the act of relations with her, we assume therefore that the Kiddushin is going to be effective. It is a question on Rabbah. You see that it is a machlokas tanoim. And to that, the Gemara says, no, Hasam Bahakam Iflagi. Over there, they're really arguing about the following. Really, everybody agrees that the condition is an effective condition over here, but the question is, what exactly was the condition? That's the Machlokas Tanoim. Mar Savar al Manas Sheyirtzo Ha'av, al Manas Sheyishto Ka'av. One says that, what does it mean that my father's going to agree? It just means he's not going to say anything. Vashasakle, and he was quiet, and that's why the Tanakama says that it's a good Kiddushin. Not because we ignore the condition, but because the Tanakama holds the condition was fulfilled, because the father didn't say anything. Umar Savar, but the other opinion says no. Amanas sheyomer abahain. Father has to actually say yes. He has to actually say that he agrees to the kiddushin. V'halo amar abahain, and therefore, since he didn't say hain, therefore that's what it means. Lo ratza ha'av eina mikudeshes. And the Gemara continues. Eisvei, we have a question from another brisa. The brisa says, Mo'udim chachamim l'Rabbi Eliezer. The chachamim admit to Rabbi Eliezer in the following case. Bekatana sheisiyo avia v'neskarsha. Let's say you have a situation of a girl that's a minor. She's married off by her father, and then she's divorced from that husband. So that original marriage is a doraisa marriage because she was married off as a minor by her father. But then she's divorced v'yisoma b'chayoav. The status of that girl is now she's considered an orphan even though her father is alive. It means to say, since she was married on a doraisa level and then divorced, she's now in her own rishus. She's no longer in the rishus of the father. And then what happens? This person who married her vechzira, now he goes ahead and he remarries her. So there, everybody agrees it's a machlokas in Yevamos over there when you're not talking about a katana, but in this particular case, by a katana, everybody agrees shecholetzes velomes yavemes. That in that case, let's say the husband dies, so then she's not going to be able to do yibam with the husband's brother. She will have to do chalitza mimnei shegerusheha gerushin gemur, because the divorce was a full divorce. Bein chazarasa chazar gemur, but she's a minor over here, and therefore it's not a doraisa marriage. She isn't really married to him on a doraisa level, and that's why there is no yibam. Everybody agrees by a minor that is the halacha. B'amed devar mamurim, and the brisa says, when is this true? Shegirsha kashikatana. That's if he divorced her while she was a minor. Vechzira kashikatana, and then he remarried her while she was a minor. Avol girsha kashikatana, but let's say he divorced her when she was a minor. Vechzira kashigadola, and then he goes ahead and he marries her and she's already an adult. That already might be a good marriage. Oh, shechzira kashikatana, or let's say even he remarries her while she's a katana. The god la etzlo, but then she becomes an adult while married. So then again, when she becomes an adult at that moment, maybe the marriage is going to be an effective marriage on a doraisa level. Vameis, and then he dies. So then already, ocholetzes omes yavemes. So then the brisa says, then she can do chalitza or yibam, meaning to say that in such a situation, it will be a doraisa marriage. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Dalid Amud Aleph.